All right, now we're in part two. This is going to be what I like to call 1837 and section 112. So Happy New Year. It is 1837. Now, 1836 has 482 documents that we still have in the Joseph Smith papers. And we get to 1837 and we get 85. Way less. Part of this is because we don't have a trillion licenses to be dishing out. But the other reason why is Joseph kind of had to skip town because things were getting a little rough. And so there wasn't quite so much recording going on. There was a lot of descendants, that's not right. Dissidents is how you say that. And so people weren't really doing their callings. And so we weren't getting a lot of documentation. We're going to get to that at the end of this as well. Anyway, I should also mention here that we are going to be, in this episode, tearing through volumes 4 and 5 of the document series of the Joseph Smith papers. So if you're thinking of this as an audiobook, we're basically going to make it all the way through volumes 4, volume 5, and a portion of volume 6. So look at how much time you're saving. That's 3 very large volumes that this guy with 2 thumbs had to read through, and you don't. So you're welcome from us here at Filling in the History. Anyway, let's start with 1837, and we get the Articles of Agreement for the Kirtland Safety Society. This is printed in the Messenger and Advocate, and it sets out a few rules for the bank. And we also get some currency from this bank, and I think this is kind of fun. So here you get a $1 bill, you get a $2 bill, you get a $3 bill. You ever seen a $3 bill? Well, this is your lucky freaking day. We also get a $5 bill, which is nice. We get a $10 bill. We got a 20. And we get the old C note. We get a $100 bill. And I really am liking this because if this artwork on this $100 bill looks familiar, it is because it is the same thing that is printed on the back of the current $2 bill, which I find very interesting. Now, what these are is money back then actually was signed by people. How annoying is that, right? So today, our money is just passed back and forth, and they're not owed to anybody in particular. But as you can see here, like these are notes. These are like debt notes that says, hey, this person is owed $100 from this bank if he asks for it, and it's signed by, members of the bank, which is Joseph Smith in this case is one of those. All right, so that's what you get. Those are the currencies: 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, and 100. And the backs of them don't really have a whole lot on them either. Anyway, so there you go. All right, we get even more licenses. We get deeds, we get promissory notes, and the like. And then we get a discourse from Joseph Smith on the 7th anniversary of the organization of the church. So this is on April 6th, 1837. Meet together, have a solemn assembly, which is what we would call a fast meeting today. And they perform the washing of feet. The presidencies received some instructions and a few corrections were made. Joseph spoke on priesthood organization and authority, and he did not speak too much about a hierarchy of authority for the quorums or anything like that. So he wasn't talking about this presidency's over that one or this group's over that one. That wasn't mentioned. After this meeting, we get a ton of deeds for land sales, promissory notes. We get a few letters. We get one letter from Newell K. Whitney talking about some legal issues Joseph was facing in Kirtland while he was away to somewhere. We actually don't really know where he went, but he was out of town. And this man by the name of Grandison Newell accused Joseph Smith of trying to have him killed. And this was not really good for a man's reputation in town, so Joseph Smith was kind of in trouble there. And then there was also an issue of Timothy Martindale taking him to task over a $5,000 unpaid debt over some land. And some writs for arrest were sent out. Now, this eventually led to the Newell issue, the Grandison Newell issue, being sort of delayed in court. This whole idea of like, you're trying to kill me. I guess he got to stay on that, and they sort of settled that later. And then there was a court case with Martindale. It was settled out of court. And we kind of assume because there's no record of any land sales that Martindale just took his land back. So that's the end of that. So Newell K. Whitney is sort of sharing this with Joseph while he was away. And it was sent to upstate New York, where we think he was kind of hanging out with around the Martin Harris area of New York State. Anyway, we also get a letter from Emma. That is not the most positive thing to read. And it starts this way, to give you an example. Dear husband, Your letter was welcomed both by friends and foes. We were glad enough to hear that you was well, and our enemies think they have almost found you by seeing where the letters were mailed. We are all well, as usual, except Mother is not quite as well as common. Our family is small, and yet I have a great deal of business to see to. Brother Tenny has not moved yet, and he does not know when he will. We have taken possession of all the room we could get. So you can see, people are intercepting letters, trying to find out where Joseph is. They're trying to etch out some sort of a living where they are. It's kind of tough. And the letter ends with this: I verily feel that if I had no more confidence in God than some I could name, I should be in a sad case indeed, but I still believe that if we humble ourselves and are faithful, as we can be, we shall be delivered from every snare that may be laid for our feet, and our lives and property will be saved, and we redeemed from all unreasonable encumbrances. My time is out. I pray that God will keep you in purity and safety till we meet again. Emma Smith. Kind of a bad situation. We're going to get into another letter here in just a second. We do get a license to Lorenzo Snow, which is kind of fun because he's later the president of the church, which uses language hinting that Lorenzo is kind of new to the church. And we're welcoming you into the church and also giving you a calling. However, just so that you know, this also matches language given to Joseph Smith himself. So that's just kind of how licenses were written. So I thought for a second, I was like, wow, this is Lorenzo Snow, like joining the church and all that stuff. But I was mistaken. It was just the two sort of matching language, which what we already have. We then get another letter from Emma, and she is a lot more desperate for correspondence from Joseph at this point about money matters, about business. She can't seem to hold on to any money because anybody who wants a cut, so she can't get any food. So like she'll get some money and somebody comes around and like, that's mine. I want my money back. Your husband owes me, blah, blah, blah. She couldn't get any food. She couldn't get any grain from anywhere. And it was a bad deal. So she was suggesting that they really, really needed a power of attorney to protect them from all this. And she suggests Vincent Knight to try to alleviate all of this. So that letter is a bad news situation, is what that was. We then get a map of Kirtland City. It's kind of fun. And we get a few other papers. And then we get a letter from Parley P. Pratt, which is actually published in a paper in 1888. And since we don't have the original, we don't know. But some contemporary accounts seem to have left out some things like that he put in a testimony of the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants. And so there might be some things that were modified here. But the historical introduction gives a great summary here. So I'm just going to read that. Fearing the financial ruin of losing his house and land, Pratt wrote this letter to Joseph Smith, threatening to bring charges against him for extortion, covetousness, and taking advantage through religious influence. Pratt never formally made these charges. However, his brother Orson Pratt and fellow apostle Lyman Johnson brought similar charges against Joseph Smith 6 days later. On the 29th of May, on the same day, Parley P. Pratt and 4 other prominent men in the church were called before the High Council for actions, quote, injurious to the Church of God, unquote. Pratt's discontent with Joseph Smith over financial matters continued into June of 1837, when he gave a discourse criticizing Joseph Smith and the church before leaving for Missouri. While traveling, he met Marsh, Patton, and William Smith, who were heading to Kirtland. Marsh persuaded Pratt to return with them. Once he arrived in Kirtland, Pratt reconciled himself with Joseph Smith. According to Pratt's autobiography, quote, I went to brother Joseph Smith in tears, and with a broken heart and contrite spirit confessed wherein I had erred in spirit, murmured or done or said amiss. He frankly forgave me, prayed for me, and blessed me, unquote. Pratt also made an acknowledgement of his faults in a Sunday meeting in Kirtland of 9th of July, before setting off with his family to proselytize in New York. Heck of a story. So, but this is a published thing. Now, what's interesting about this is what you get here. Warren Parrish took a letter that he wrote, plus this letter from Parley P. Pratt, and published them in a newspaper not owned by the church called Zion's Watchman, which is why it finds its way into this article, which is called Naked Truths About Mormonism, again from 1888, which is published in Oakland, California. So this is way later. So yeah, there's some question about the contents of this, but yeah, it was pretty harsh language. So very interesting letter from an apostle. But this is the kind of conflict that we're running into right now in the church at the time. More documents follow, and then we get a letter from somebody by the name of Abel Lamb and a few others where they feel that Frederick G. Williams, Lyman Johnson, Parley Pratt, and Warren Parrish should be called to the High Council for injuries against the church. And as you will see later on, excommunications and disfellowshipments start happening. So things are getting real. We do get charges against Joseph Smith written in the hand of Warren Parrish. Read these off to you. It says, "To the bishop and his council in Kirtland, the stake of Zion, we prefer the following charges against President Joseph Smith Jr., viz., for lying and misrepresenting, also for extortion, and for speaking disrespectfully against his brethren behind their backs. Lyman E. Johnson, Orson Pratt." So, yeah, getting even more real. We get some recommendations, we get land agreements, and we get a public letter from W.W. Phelps in the Messenger and Advocate that shares the progress on the city goings-on and some debts being paid off. So that's nice. Seems like we're kind of mixing our messages here. Anyway, we get the House of the Lord in Kirtland being mortgaged to Meade, Stanford & Co. on the 11th of July, 1837. So I'm just going to say this again. They're so desperate for money and raising money that they decide to mortgage the Kirtland Temple to a firm in New York. This nearly cost the church the building itself, but they desperately needed the money to pay off the debts that they had. And if you remember from a previous episode, this is where Brother Tanner shows up with a lot of cash and actually pays that mortgage off and saves the temple. So, lest it would have been torn down or whatever, like, you can thank Brother Tanner once again for this. And I may also add, thank you to Meade, Stanford & Co. for believing in these men enough to help them get through it. So I know it's not maybe what you want to do, but they did all that they could do. We also get some promissory notes to follow these that these men entered into, which makes a lot of sense. And then we get Section 112. So quite a crazy year so far. So let's get into this. As you've seen already, there's a lot of crap going on, like just throwing back and forth. If that's too graphic of an image for you, I'm sorry. The earliest copy of this is actually in Joseph Smith's journal that covers a period from March to September of 1838. It is in the handwriting of James Mulholland. And the whole thing kind of seems to be crossed out. And I'm seeing this a lot lately. It's like little slashes through things. There is another copy that we find in a letter from Violet Kimball to her husband, Heber C. Kimball. The only thing that we have of that is a photocopy of the letter, so the original is lost, but thank heaven somebody photocopied it. We get it on a loose paper, a copy that is in just an unknown hand. This is held in the Community of Christ archives. Actually, not sure who wrote this, but it's a legitimate copy, so here we have it. We get 5 loose pages that were from Thomas B. Marsh with this revelation in his own hand. We get a copy in Brigham Young's journal. We get a copy in Wilford Woodruff's Book of Revelations. We get a copy in Willard Richards' Pocket Companion. Heber C. Kimball has a copy in his journal. William W. Phelps has a copy in his own hand. And just so that you know, the Revelation is published in the 1844 Doctrine and Covenants, but that was released after Joseph's death. And we also get some histories that cover this. So, everybody's got a copy of this. And if you notice, Brigham Young, Wilford Woodruff, Willard Richards, Heber Kimball, these are apostles. Because this revelation is intended specifically for Thomas B. Marsh, who is the president of the Quorum of the 12 and the members of that quorum. So let's get into the circumstantial introduction to this. Joseph Smith's journal simply gives us this. A revelation given Kirtland, July 23rd, 1837. The word of the Lord unto Thomas B. Marsh concerning the 12 apostles of the Lamb. We get the exact same introduction in Violet's letter, letter. Brigham Young's journal, Wilford Woodruff's Book of Revelation, Richard's Pocket Companion, and Kimball's journal. So everybody kind of copies this introduction. Now, the unidentified scribe, the mystery person here, writes this. Kirtland, Cayuga County, Ohio, July 23rd, 1837. The word of the Lord unto Thomas B. Marsh concerning the 12. And that's it. Now, President Marsh's copy has the exact same thing. So there's kind of two introductions here. The third version of this, William W. Phelps, is a little different. It says Revelation to Thomas B. Marsh concerning the 12 apostles of the Lord given in Kirtland, Ohio, July 23rd, 1837. So there's your contemporary introductions. We do have some differences in the modern section headings. In 1981, it says, the word of the Lord unto Thomas B. Marsh concerning the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Sound familiar? The prophet records that this revelation was received on the day on which the gospel was first preached in England. Thomas B. Marsh was at this time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. The 2013 edition is a little different. It says, this revelation was received on the day elders Heber C. Kimball and Orson Hyde first preached the gospel in England. Thomas B. Marsh was at this time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Quite different. All right, so a little bit more. Historical introduction. We got some trouble here. Apostles Marsh, David W. Patton, and William Smith traveled from far west Missouri to Kirtland, Ohio in the summer of 1837 to address Quorum members' dissent against Joseph Smith and seek to unify the 12. To these ends, Marsh and Patton called for a council meeting of the entire Quorum of the 12 on the 24th of July, 1837. Marsh, Patton, and Smith arrived in Kirtland on the 8th of July, but they found that Joseph Smith and the church presidency had sent 2 of the 12, Heber C. Kimball and Orson Hyde, to proselytize in England in mid-June. Marsh saw this as his responsibility to direct members of the 12 to preach in foreign lands. He had corrected Parley P. Pratt for planning to undertake a mission to England in May, and he may have harbored some frustration that he was not consulted regarding the mission. The 23rd July revelation assured Marsh that he was chosen to lead the 12 and to spread the gospel abroad among all nations, but made it clear that he should do so under the direction of the first presidency. So that's one thing, and that seems to be cleared away, and I love that. Like, let's come together. I'm kind of ready to boil over here, and they get a revelation, and they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, it's incredible that people would think this way. I don't know. Very easy way to solve your problems. But we got even more trouble. So from the historical introduction, the revelation also addressed dissent, which had intensified among some church members in mid-1837. It troubled Marsh that several of the 12 had been involved in the discord. By early May, he and Patton had heard rumors in Far West that apostles John F. Boynton and Luke and Lyman Johnson were speaking out in opposition to Joseph Smith and other leaders. Lyman Johnson, Orson Pratt, and Luke Johnson had preferred charges against Joseph Smith and his father in late May. In June, Parley P. Pratt had preached against Joseph Smith before leaving for Missouri. Reflecting in January 1838 on growing unrest, Violet Murray Kimball wrote in a letter to her husband Heber that she felt the dissenters had valid reasons for their frustrations, but that they had nonetheless pursued an improper course of action. Quote, now, after all that I have said about this dissenting party, there is some of them that I love and have great feeling and pity for them. I know they have been tried to the very quick, but that grieves me that most of all is that many things which they tell, I have no doubt but what are too true. Still, I do not think they are justifiable in the course they have taken. Unquote. So it's okay to have a problem. It's not okay to flap your lips out loud like that, or so publicly, or whatever the case may be. So further into this, we get the original manuscript of the Revelation, as written by Marsh, has not been found, but several copies are extant. The earliest version was copied by Violet Kimball into a 6th of September letter she had sent to her husband, Heber. Violet wrote that she had copied the Revelation from Elder Marsh's book as he wrote it from Joseph's mouth. She also provided additional details regarding the revelation, which Marsh had discussed with her. According to Violet, Joseph Smith had told Marsh at the time of the revelation that the door of proclamation could not be effectually opened until Marsh went to England or sent someone he had ordained for that purpose. But Joseph Smith had instructed him not to include this in his transcript in the 23rd of July revelation. Heber, who was now in England proselytizing, responded to Marsh's claims by telling Violet that I keep saying that wrong. Villate is her name. That Joseph Smith had told him it was all right to prepare the way for Brother Marsh, as John was the forerunner of Christ to prepare before him to baptize. And that despite what Marsh thought, that the missionaries would have little success without his direction. Those preaching in England had already baptized many people in their short time there. Unfortunately, a page has been lost from Villate's 6th of September letter, and her copy of the Revelation is incomplete, which is why we use this other one. And so several of the 12 made their own copies for the missions, which is why we have so many. So before they left, they took copies with them. So content and footnote, there's not a lot of usable footnotes here. It's mostly references to scriptures and other revelations. So the opening of it says this, Verily I say unto you, there have been some few things in thine heart and with thee, with which I the Lord was not well pleased. Nevertheless, inasmuch as thou hast abased thyself, thou shalt be exalted. Therefore all thy sins are forgiven thee. Let thy heart be of good cheer before my face, and thou shalt bear record of my name not only unto the Gentiles, but also unto the Jews, and thou shalt send forth my word unto the ends of the earth. Contend thou therefore morning by morning, and day after day, let thy warning voice go forth. And when the night cometh, let not the inhabitants of the earth slumber because of thy speech. Let thy habitation be known in Zion, and remove not thy house. For I the Lord have a great work for thee to do, in publishing my name among the children of men. Therefore gird up your loins for the work. So, we further get into this as, Now I say unto you, and what I say unto you, I say unto all the 12, Arise and gird up your loins, take up your cross, follow me, and feed my sheep. Exalt not yourselves, rebel not against my servant Joseph. For verily I say unto you, I am with him, and my hand shall be over him. And the keys which I have given him, and also to you word, shall not be taken from him until I come. Now, there is an intention here that the beatings will continue until the morality improves, but it's going to start in our own house. So we get this from the Revelation. A day of desolation, of weeping, of mourning, and of lamentation, as a whirlwind it shall come upon all the face of the earth, saith the Lord. And upon my house shall it begin, and from my house shall it go forth, saith the Lord. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name, and have not known me, and have blasphemed against me in the midst of my house, saith the Lord. Footnote 25 to this says, This may be a reference to dissenters, such as Warren Parrish, who spoke against Joseph Smith in the house of the Lord in mid-June of 1837. So inside of the Kirtland Temple, he gives a speech. And this, I would say, is probably a reference to that, partially. Revelation ends with this. Cleanse your hearts and your garments, lest the blood of this generation be required at your hands. Be faithful until I come, for I come quickly, and my reward is with me to recompense every man according to as his work shall be. I am Alpha and Omega. Amen. And the reason why I read all of that, biggest reason why I read all of that, is because you're going to see this sort of cleansing of dissent and putting people down, like I said, disfellowship, excommunications fly in 1837. And I believe a lot of it is from this language. So I just wanted to tee that up as we get into the next portion of this. So stick around for part 3 and a little bit more filling in the history.